I'd like all three of you to talk a bit about yourselves and where you are right now. So, Eric?
I'm the co-founder of PlumWillow, which is a social shopping network for teenage girls. I'm also the co-founder and chief architect of Fort, which is an enterprise framework for PHP and an open source project. I organize the New York City MySQL Group, which is the world's largest database meetup, and have a few other roles as well.
Mike Bryzek, co-founder and CTO of Gilt Groupe. How many people know Gilt Groupe? Everybody. So we're working on new ways to describe the business. So I'll try this, and you can let me know what you think. But as Gilt's grown, we're starting to talk about it as, can you imagine Gilt as a luxury Amazon, where the best brands are on sale at 30 to 70% off. And we're going at about 3.5 years old. About 600 full-time employees. We've had some great days and some really bad days, and still growing.
My name is Justin Day. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Lit.tv. We're an online video host focused on people making independent web shows. So we help these guys who are making these indie web shows do everything that isn't production. So hosting, distribution, promotion, and most importantly, monetization through ad sales. So we put ads in the videos, split the revenue 50-50, and therein lies both our business models.
So I understand one of the reasons why I got this panel together is I wanted to have them express different perspectives and opinions on how things get set up. We're going to speak to issues about when you know that you need to scale, and then what happens when things don't go as planned. What happens when you really have to start thinking about expansion, and what are the real issues attached to that. And we're also going to talk to issues of breakpoints. Should you be in the cloud? Should you not be in the cloud? Should you be a mix? And what's entailed. So let's start off first section. Just an overview about CTOs. I'm really passionate about technology, and sometimes my decisions are cloudy. I will tell you that I was the first director of interactive technology at Ogilvy Advertising in New York City, and I'm fully familiar with Lotus Notes, even when it was iOS, way back in the day when Ozzy was cooking it up. Didn't like it back then. And when I found out that Ogilvy, with their lead client IBM, was going to bring in Lotus Notes as a mail solution for the enterprise, I had a blank letter of resignation waiting in my boss's desk drawer. And he knew already that the minute they officially announced it, that I would sign off on that letter because I just did not want to be there. And that's where my passion maybe got the best of me, but I just did not want to be there to be in charge of supporting Lotus Notes in the enterprise. If you ever had to deal with replication issues which were beyond your control,
We don't mind.
so what I want to talk about here is to all three of you. When you come into projects and you come into companies and you're looking to start building out the architecture, you come with preconceptions in your mind. We're going to do it this way, and then only to learn that things have to change on the fly because things that you thought were one way turn out to be 180 degrees diametrically opposed. And also want you to speak to when you start looking at the makeup of teams. I mean, as things start changing, just talking about how you manage the teams. You start talking about whether you have your developers, the right people on board, and are they the people that you're going to need, let's say, a year from now. So just any one of you start. Just start jumping into that one.
Well, I think one of the first pieces of that sort of when technology starts to get divorced from product is one of the hard things to take. Is, very early on when it's just founders, you're kind of having a big influence on every decision that's being made on developing the product, and when you go to a certain level, those people start to break out, become their own team, and it ends up being better for the company, but it's one of those things you have to learn to let go.
And did you find that some of the original ideas of technology ideas changed in a negative way that you wish didn't have to be that way? Were there issues with control across groups?
I think one of the things that I was guilty of is trying to give everyone everything. Put all the bells and whistles in it, whereas the product guys know a little bit better, like give it only the minimum they may need to be be successful. And I think, that was going on less than something.
Right?
I mean, and that's been a big challenge for us too. Is as you scale the organization, you've got lots of people, and you start hiring, try to hire only great people, and you repeat, and then ultimately everybody has to contribute, and so what's the best way? And you mentioned product and technology, and we have the challenge at Gilt right now, where it's how do you drive, how do you keep innovation high, how do you keep people engaged? So at the end of the day, if you look at where all these startups have come from, and you look at, like, Facebook is a great article on what their culture is like internally, how do you keep with hundreds of people, those few people that are gonna be up all night and work 48 hours straight and ship something that's gonna work good enough that the members are gonna love it? And then how do you do that at scale when actually the risk of a mistake is actually a little bit more costly? It's hard.
Well, Eric, I'll ask you this question. How do you know, for example, if you're picking the right people, and let's say with respect, let's say to databases, how do you know if the people that you're bringing on, well, they may be best suited like early on in the early stages, as things begin to grow, things become more complex, and you start having to get more, functions built into operations. How do you start making those decisions?
Well, I think the first situation is where your starting point is. Are you starting from an existing project, or are you building from the ground up? Because if you build it from the ground up, you can take certain steps to maintain I guess sanity would be the word, and be able to scale it properly. In a lot of situations, that's not a luxury that's available, in which case you kind of have to work with what you have, in which every situation sort of differs. Where is the pain points? Where are you lacking in your HR side of things? In other words, who do you have? Who is missing from your team that knows how to make this scale and bring it to the next level? So the way to identify generally that is to analyze person by person on the team. In the case of someone like Mike over here, Gilt, I don't know if you can do that, 300 people, right? That might be a little hard, but with general smaller scale startups, each person has strengths and weaknesses on your team. If you know who you have and what they're good at, and you can pretty easily identify what you're missing and bring on those extra points to the team. In terms of identifying if you've made the right choice, generally I start with some technical sample of what they achieved before hiring. So if it's a developer, it's easy, it's code samples. For sysadmins, it's a little harder. But basically, you look at what to expect, and if when they start work, it doesn't match, then it's probably not a good fit. Usually, if you get through a few weeks with them, then it's usually what you know what to expect from here on, typically.
Yeah, and I'll just, so we're actually about 600 employees now at Gilt. I think the honest answer is it's almost impossible, right? In the interview process, like how do you need good people, you need a funnel, you have limited time, so how do you find something that's a good fit? And so I think everybody tries their best during the interview process. Some of it is, one easy thing we found is you just ask people to write them, implement Fibonacci on a whiteboard. And that's a good filter, and you just 2/3 of your work is done. And then you're down to the third of the people who actually do Fibonacci. So there's like easy filters like that, but then I think it's really just about being aggressive when people come in, right? And we're open. You're going to come in, you're going to have a lot of responsibility at Gilt. We've been growing rapidly. Your onboarding process is you have to deliver a project, and you have to, the documentation is in the code. If you don't like the documentation, rewrite it, and that's how you live at Gilt. And that's going to appeal to a certain type of engineer, and those engineers that come in are really successful, really happy. And if they're not, let's be honest, it's just not a fit. And let's do that quickly and move on. And we made a mistake, and we feel like we go out of our way to make sure that that's as comfortable for the person as possible. Because we're responsible, they're responsible, we made that choice, and we try to make the transition as easy as possible for that person. But ultimately, it's not Gilt didn't work out for them. It's tough to find a place that's good and for them, and let's focus on the type of people that are going to succeed at Gilt.
Yeah. Of the 600, how many are engineers?
So I think in technology broadly, there's roughly 100 people, and then that's split. So Jetsetter has a subsidiary of Gilt focused on travel. Gilt City focused on events. They each have their own engineering teams included in that 100. total people writing code today is probably 40, 45 people, and then move around that.
Well, here's something people to think about. So many companies are involved where the end result is going to be, connected to the internet. So, it's sort of hard to determine like who's not a technology company anymore. How many companies are there where technology isn't really a main focus of the company? But with respect to the CTO and operations, to what extent is technology setting the timeline for how fast or how slow, who's calling the shots these days? Who has more control of that situation?
Delivery. I mean,
In all aspects,
I think planning itself is a kind of an interesting topic, right? So as an example, like what's going to be new on Gilt in the next 6 months, and the answer is you have to go ask 10 different teams, and they'll tell you what they're thinking about, and so that becomes really hard. Like, so what's the entire roadmap for the company going to look like? So we've completely decentralized it to try to give back the idea generation at the level of you've got a team of 4 or 5 people that's cross-functional and they're going to go build something great, and that could be it could be widgets, it could be Gilt City, it could be they're just going to build the best. We send a lot of email, so build the best damn email service in the world for a company that needs to send a ton of email in time. But whatever, it's a small team, they're going to figure out what they can do. But then it makes the broader planning really hard.
I think at Blip, the technology team ultimately sets the timeline, the roadmap, the product development roadmap. But you have to sort of be able to balance all the different teams who want to implement things and make sure they're getting what they need, and you're still getting what you need in terms of time to redevelop things for scaling, or refactor things for whatever reason you need to. But then ultimately, I think our micro CEO has been really good about letting me kind of hold those reins and make sure that we're not getting in over our head.
So, just as sort of background, how hands-on are each of you? And as projects and companies progress, how comfortable are you three with retrenching yourself and taking on more management decisions, or have you gone the other way and delegated those decisions to somebody else?
I'm totally hands-on. I pretty much form the architecture for every project that I work on, and then delegate the fleshing out of it to the team. The level of which I work on it will vary based on the project that I'm working on, but essentially everything starts with me, whether it be actual coding or simple diagram structure that the team follows, varies by what's being built. But I make sure that we hands-on at every starting point, so the framework is in place for a scalable, high-performance product when we're finished. Delegation, I don't mind that. I'm not afraid of losing control over it. If you build a solid team that knows what they're doing and doesn't need too much hand-holding, then generally you can delegate things and get it done remotely close to what your vision started out as.
Yeah, I write a ton of code. I love writing code, and so as Gilt grew, there's lots of different things that you really need to be thinking about. Like hiring is probably the single most important thing to scale. I wasn't actually all that interested in hiring because I wanted to code, and so those two things started to compete. So what we ended up doing at Gilt is we had a great engineer that started our business intelligence and data engineering group. He's actually a PhD, a pragmatic PhD, and just a great guy. And he built one of our core engineering teams. We promoted him to be the CIO of Gilt, and he took, I think at the time I probably had 70 or 80 reports. He took all but 2, and I was left with a really, really small team. And one of them is one of our co-founding engineers, and he and I worked together for like a decade, so it's not really, there's no management there. And the idea there was really to just separate the responsibilities for Gilt so that you could have somebody who owned, thinking about how do we get the right organizational structure, the processes, the hiring process, the right people, the communication around the organization so that you can still do strategic planning and still talk about what do we want to be doing in 6 months. It's hard for us to go past 6 months. And separate that from the technical delivery of the application that we build at Gilt. And then structurally, I think what we've tried to do is really distribute into small teams that have ownership of different components of the stack. And to do that, Gilt today is really, really service-oriented. And the best way to describe that, because a lot of people talk about service-oriented architecture, when we built the iPad app or the iPhone app, we didn't have to touch our core server infrastructure to do that, right? The iPad or iPhone or Android or the mobile side or the Japan side or the US side or Gilt City, that stuff is really just user interface on top of core services. Gilt City then built a bunch of functionality around what they were selling, but fundamentally it's a pretty sophisticated service layer that provides that feature set. So now what you can start doing is build a team around each of those services that now has complete control over a piece of the infrastructure. And they actually own all of the technical decisions. They're responsible for if the service goes down or up or the uptime, they're responsible for it. And then we really retreat and set kind of a baseline of recommendations or solutions that people can use for building software at Gilt that will survive when it goes live. And that includes things like the architecture, there's tools that you can use, as well as just the little things like how do you deploy something to production incrementally, safely, so you can do whatever you want and do it really, really safe, because it actually just got deployed to the engineers only. So if you have a mistake, you see something you don't like. And so really now the organization is built around almost kind of a mindset or an approach for how do you deliver new applications safely. And I think it's starting to work as measured by, I look at the rate of gray hairs appearing on top of my head, and that rate is decreasing, so things are starting to work.
Justin, I wanted to add one thing. I consider myself fortunate to know a lot of the guys at Gilt TV, and it's a really great technical crew of people. And I'm curious, Justin, because you started out with such a really solid core of people.
Mm-hmm.
How did you figure out, like, from a technical standpoint, like who'd be working on what, and how did that all play out?
So a lot of that happened naturally. We allow the developers to kind of gravitate toward what they're most interested in. And I guess my approach, coming back to what we were talking about, is somewhere in the middle of both of yours, where I really see myself as the defender of the tech team. And I'm the guy that's supposed to be out there in the front lines, dealing with everyone else in the company, or be the guy that's there if there's a fire, or if there's a problem, or if something really low level needs to be engineered or re-engineered. That's what I do. But then, we've sort of, in the very beginning, the developer team was just anyone could work on whatever they really wanted to. People gravitated towards certain things, and that formed the basis of the teams that are now more fleshed out and efficient now.
Interesting. This is something I know this guy I didn't even know. Somebody had a question? Sorry.
Yeah, well, how do you balance, so say example, like customers are asking for something different, marketing's asking for something different. You've kind of already gone down a technology track and had your vision, and so how do you deal with that when all of a sudden somebody says this has got to be short-circuited in a hurry?
You need a product manager who acts as that mediator between the two, and that person takes ownership of the product and does exactly what you're saying needs to be done. That's the person who sees sales, sees marketing, and says we have to come up with a product that the end user is going to use and is going to market well and it's going to be sellable. But on the other hand, it has to fit within our tech time frames and all the sources. And that person essentially, that's their role to a large extent.
Yeah, we spin it a little bit differently. So the evolution of Gilt, we launched a website, Ruby on Rails monolithic thing. People started buying stuff. We're like, oh shit, we have to build a returns process. That was day one. Return process went live on day two, and it just continued. And then and then we were on national TV, and 50,000 people signed up in an hour. We're like, wow, the site's slow. And it just became this. And so we said, oh, we know how to fix this slow site. Use caching. That's what everybody else does. Use Memcache. And it's like, everyone's doing the same stuff anyway. Let's just see a message and publish everything and use Apache to search static files. And the next day we sold, it was like $800,000 of merchandise a year, and we were like, wow, that was great. And then said, we want to do something different on the site, and we can't. And that was a problem. So what we did is we said, this is kind of crazy, and we made a lot of sense given just the growth and what we had to do, and it worked, but we have to rewrite this whole thing. And we're going to rewrite it in such a way that there'll be no caching, because caching is way too hard. People think caching is easy, it's the hardest thing in the entire world, and it doesn't actually work for Gilt's problem. Because Gilt's traffic ramps up very quickly. Most caching works by cache miss, go to the database, cache the content. we crash on a cache miss. So it doesn't work for us. So he said, caching is way too hard, we just won't cache anymore. So okay, decision one. How the hell do we do that? Right? And that took a year, maybe a little bit more. And we rewrote the entire architecture to really make all the decisions in real time at request time on the site. And that was hard. But the advantage is now you want to vary content, or you change a piece of the site, it's like just change it. Like there is no preconceived notion. And now the things that are hard are like the ideas that really are fundamentally different to our business model. So it's just one concrete example. Gilt inventory, we manage our inventory globally, right? So that even though we may target a sale to you, there's 2 sales, like it's still, we have 10 shirts, we have 10 shirts, we sell 10 shirts. Like at the end of the day, we have 10 shirts. What's that?
Transaction problem.
Yeah, it's transactional. Oh, it's actually, that's a great, if you guys want to get into some really cool technology, that thing is amazing. But we have 10 shirts, and so what becomes hard for us is, we brainstorm, we've got people on the West Coast, East Coast, should we offer 5 shirts for sale at 9 p.m. on the East Coast and save 5 for 9 p.m. on the West Coast? And that's hard, because it doesn't fit our model. But actually it's a really nice place to be, because like, wait a minute, that's not what Gilt's about. Gilt's about fairness. Nobody buys early, everybody comes at noon, everybody fights with each other, and we sell 10 shirts. Like so it ends up being a bigger question around, is this a place where we want the business model itself to evolve at Gilt? And it's bigger than just the technology.
Gilt sounds like Darwinian, survival of the fittest. You jump in for the sale and you get it, you do otherwise.
People have broken mice, clicking the button.
So, early on in a startup, you wear a lot of hats. So before you really have sort of a product team that you can go and talk to everyone, get everyone's input, decide what's going to happen first and what's going to happen later. Early on it was Mike and I who would sit down with whomever else in the company and kind of have it out a little bit. Let's figure this out. We'll do our best to give you what you want, but you have to understand that these are the things you're going to give up. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we handle it up until actually pretty recently.
Well, a couple things that have come up, and at the hatchery I deal with, I know hundreds of, sometimes even thousands of the last 4 years of startups, coming to us, and I'm speaking with so many of them, I'm learning so much about how they're working. And one of the things they bring up is that because of social media, they are so, and things are so public, that the CTO is a sitting duck. If something isn't working right, and consumers and the customers, they just start tweeting about it. There's nowhere to run. And the thing is, since they're across any time zone, the thing is, you're just fair game. Because all of a sudden, if there's one perceived slowness or one perceived, blip on the radar, for a customer somewhere, and they just start saying they're having a bad experience, whether it's true or just matter of perception, that just grows. And these are things that I'm wondering how, in this day and age, look, I'm 47. When I was, early on as CTO, there was nothing like this. So, we knew how to cover our tracks. The thing is, we weren't having everybody looking over our shoulder. We just knew that, we had to deal with it, and we just had to stay a couple of steps ahead to be safe. But I'm not sure you have that kind of cover these days.
The short answer is you don't go down. You really do what you can to make sure you have 100% uptime and you don't deploy things that aren't heavily tested. In my case, I'm fairly neurotic about certain aspects of it to make sure that you can't have this repercussions, knowing that it's big repercussions if it should happen. My backups are approaching absurd. I think I have about 8 different layers of backups, from entire server instance images all the way down to change logs that could be regenerated. You can regenerate the content from the change logs and everything in between. There must be about 8 layers of backups, and if any one of those, from any one of those I could restore from, and I always test the restores, by the way. That's probably the best advice. I have once encountered someone who didn't do that and had never tried restoring, and by the person's luck, the restore didn't work, but they forgot to acknowledge the fact that it was restoring from a tape that was dozens of other data on that same tape drive. So it took like 4 hours of downtime just to get their data off the tape. Whereas if they had tested that for that, they would have probably found a different means to back up. But in any case, there's backups, there's scalability hurdles that you really want to maintain very low overhead on your servers. Today, cloud servers are dirt cheap. I mean, someone paid for a hosting account 10 years ago the same as you're getting full dedicated cloud servers now. Keep your servers really not busy. I mean, if you got 40-50% usage on a server, then start deploying outward and just keep them really quiet. So when burst comes in, you got ample bandwidth to handle it. Keep things very heavily replicated, no single point of failure. Never have any server in one. Everything comes minimum in two. A friend of mine had a really cool way of thinking about this. Think Noah's Ark, everything in twos. And I thought that was cute. And I sort of live
We
by
have a
that.
rule of 4 at Gilt.
4, yeah. Bible rewritten, okay.
The difference, 1 to 2 makes a lot of sense. I think everyone gets that. 2 to 3, if you actually look at the code people write, it'll force them into a configuration file. And 3 to 4 was our, we had a huge release 2 years ago, which was very scary and a bad idea, but it went really well. We deployed it in clusters of 4 and it worked. And so if you got something good, just stick with it. So rule of 4.
We do lots of small changes, quick to roll back, and own up to our mistakes very publicly. So, you know, if we're more public than someone else on Twitter, then it kind of disarms all that.
But I'm sort of curious, to what extent has social media, have people who are using your platform or product, have their messages, kept you up in nights, had your marketing teams coming to you and saying, we're getting all this negative, publicity or this negative perception. How does this, change
We think
your schedule?
it's great, because I'd argue, separate analogies I think may apply. When cell phones and Blackberries and all that came out, people were like, oh my God, I'm working all the time. For me, it allowed me to go on vacation, because I could know what's going on, I could be connected, and it actually freed me from being here or at home. And I think social media is the same thing. You do something wrong, you hear about it right away, and you fix it right away. And you can let people know, it's like, thanks very much, you're right, or here's why we do these things. So I think for us, it's actually, like, the fact that the feedback cycle is so fast, particularly if you're releasing all the time small changes, then it could be better.
Yeah, and I think it works both ways. We also get a lot of tweets where, wow, the TV was really responsive, and they reached out to us when we complained about this, and they fixed the problem, pushed out a patch right away. That's awesome. And so, you can turn that negative publicity right around.
I'm going to open it up to some of you guys, because I want to get some ideas about what's going on with your companies and on the social media, like how you're reacting to either customers or people who are tweeting about things, and what if how you're reacting to them, or how your CEOs are they coming to you with issues and concerns, because they may not understand what's going on with technology. They're saying, I just saw 7 tweets about our company that are need to address. So is anybody here dealing with social media creep into their work?
We're in stealth mode, so.
I bring this up because I hear this from a lot of startups, especially those who've gotten like their first round of funding, and they start telling me that they're now having to be responsive to like a lot more people, because it used to be that the account managers would come in and say that we have this issue, that issue, but now people are just seeing all these messages. They're seeing people are saying, again, whether it's true or not, some people have to deal with. I'm going to give you an example of something that I did using, I'm not sure we consider IM social media, but when I was at Euro RCG, which is a global advertising agency, I was a CTO. Instead of purchasing software to monitor the network on each floor, which I thought was ridiculous, the costs were just exorbitant. So I just had like about 15, 20 people on each floor install various like IM platforms, software and machines. And then I assigned like members of the technology team, buddies with all these different people. So we would know if floors or sectors were out by people acknowledging and not acknowledging over, through the IM network.
Smart.
The thing is, and it was it was sort of crowdsourcing network monitoring. But it's the sort of thing where and I bring this up because it was just, you know, a very sort of agile way of, you know, coming to a solution, which was, you know, use the people who were there, and using, in my sense, I was using my customers, you know, in the agency to help me do my job. So I want to get to something now that's involved with a roadmap. When you start looking at what the plans are, if there has to be a change, at what point can you not change? And is there any point of no return where, you know, we've gone down this path and we just have to plow ahead? Or is there always room in the equation?
You could always change, it's just, there's a point that's no longer cost effective to do that. Definitely reached that point where you've invested so much into the platform that there's no turning back, but it's not really, there's no turning back. I mean, if it was such a giant hurdle that it became cost effective to swap it out, you can. In general, I've not seen too many applications where it makes sense to completely scrap something and start again. If it's profitable. If it's not profitable, then you haven't really had that much invested that was successful, so then it's a different story.
Going down the line from a development standpoint, if you start developing something, you know, early on as a prototype, and you start working in one language, one development platform, when you start getting the traction, you start seeing that you may need to build this out, you know, in some other language, some other format. How do you like, individually make the decisions on going from A to B, and how much time do you take, you know, in the whole path to make that decision? You know, because a lot of issues come up with making short-term, long-term decisions, and you know, do you spend a lot more time because you know you can make that many changes down the road?
So, I don't know if you guys have read I think it was Cal Henderson, his book about Flickr. He wrote something to the effect of the most elegant code is the code that you'll write that will last the next 3 to 6 months and be replaceable in place. And that's actually really, really hard to do in practice. But I think captures a little bit of what you're saying. And you know, there's areas, so for Gilt, we started, it was 2007, with Ruby on Rails, and had a lot of the features that we want for getting to market quickly. And then has, you know, at scale, at Gilt scale, you start to exceed the bounds of kind of traditional architecture or even from normal approaches. And for us, it has been driven by the people more than anything else. And so when we made the decision to rewrite the front end of Gilt in Java, it was really driven by, it was actually one person, Pierre Magnuson, was on the Apache board, wrote Velocity, a bunch of other stuff. He was an insanely great engineer. He was on board, today's our chief architect, and it was him proving that the technologies that he was proposing would work. And as an example of proving, we run our e-commerce system on a distributed key value store. To prove that that thing would work, it's billions of transactions on EC2 on our hardware over weeks of testing to figure out what this thing looked like under load. He actually found race conditions in the core software, fixed them, but it's just that level of diligence around the tools and technology that eventually, you know, and Gilt worked out. But fundamentally, it's about a key, strong engineer that has the energy and the drive to do something different and own it.
Yeah, I don't think that decisions around language really matter a whole lot. I think what you're going to get on one language versus another is incremental differences, which you know we need to be talking about orders of magnitude. Frameworks are another matter. You may depend on the framework, and I think eventually you will come to own whatever framework you decide to work with. So like if you're a rail shop, eventually you'll be getting down under the hood, changing things to whatever fits your needs. But you know, that versus building up from the ground up, at the end of the day, you end up in the same place.
Is anybody here facing issues about, you know, having built something out and prototype in one framework or one development area and then moving to another?
So we
just at Brainscape, we just completed a rewrite. Partially because the system developed over time. I mean, when Andrew, our CEO, invented it, it was just an Excel macro that he wrote to teach him French. Like he was studying in Martinique and he needed a way to like memorize French vocabulary, so he just wrote this Excel macro that would space out the repetitions and give you the different vocabulary words in a certain order, and you could like measure your confidence with it, and based on your confidence, it deliver the words to you faster or slower. You know, this product became something that people found useful, that he developed into a web platform, but it went through a couple of revisions. He was no programmer, but he took some programming classes, so he hacked it together in Java, and then you know, put it off to another developer who we later kept on long term. So it was this project that had a bunch of hands in it, and the business model and everything evolved over time. So naturally, things are going to get messy, you know. You know, now step back a couple of months ago, we had this JSP set up, and I think it was using it was Spring MVC at the time, and a lot of patchwork and 20 iPhone apps out on the App Store that used the same set of services. So like we did an entire rewrite in Ruby on Rails mainly because we wanted to develop a process around it. It was not easy, but it certainly made things a lot neater, more scalable at the time.
Were you actually able to turn off the legacy system?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Gone.
yeah. Last one. I mean, it still exists, but we're not using it.
So the Excel macro is gone, or?
I actually like the Excel macro. You distribute it, you get CPU power in every handheld. It was a great idea.
We are keeping it for archive purposes. So if we you know, get to the point where history of Brainscape is something cool, we're going to put it on a website.
How'd you release the new version?
So we did everything. We used a lot of Rails conventions for everything. So we were already using migrations in Ruby with the old JSP site. We basically, with the new Rails app, we created new migrations to take the old data structure, take it to the new structure, migrate all the data, run some tests on it, and we just did it in the middle of the night and made a big long checklist of the things that we were automatically testing and things we were manually checking out. You know, key points where we should look at the site to see, you know, what the hell could be wrong, and key things that we can manually test to make sure that the integrity is still intact. And that's pretty much what we did.
Can we do a quick survey of the room to see you know, who's here? Are we B2B and who's consumer focused, and who codes and who doesn't code?
All right, so show of hands, who's B2B? I'm assuming that means others are B2C? Unless there's a third one I'm missing here? Oh,
CDC.
Maybe explain the answer to that social media question, right?
okay.
And who codes? Just out of curiosity.
So I wanted to get to the size doesn't matter slide, which is pretty much just talking about growth and how growth is handled, and what effect, you know, expansion has. You know, companies all want to expand, they all want to scale, they all want to meet their numbers and surpass their numbers. And it's a good thing, but getting there and being able to manage that comes with its own issues. So I'd like to start with Mike. Gilt is sort of this company where I just sort of heard about it, and then like a short time later with Zoom, it just, you know, the hockey stick just like vertical, you know, and you know, how do you deal with that? I mean, how were things before that slope, and then like how did you manage that?
Yeah, there were days where we didn't know if we'd be around, right? You just see the traffic and you're just running. Yeah, I mean, I think the honest answer is that the team that we had built, like nobody had gone through that. Largely, you find it's really, really rare to meet somebody who has gone through that and then does it again and is lucky enough to do it again in a company that goes through another hockey stick. And so a lot of it is you start to see things that are, you can look at the traffic and really the first instinct is like, what should we be looking at? Like where are we seeing pain? And then for us at Gilt, what we did is really, it was about drawing a funnel, which I think is a pretty familiar concept, but we looked at it from a transactional point of view, because the transactions are what were killing us, like all the right transactions to the database. So can I reserve this unit inventory use to the database that. And so we looked at the funnel of people coming to the site to register, people coming to the site to look at a sale, people coming to the site to enter their cart, to check out, and there were a few other transactions there. And really, we sorted it based on traffic and likelihood that it would we'd feel pain in that particular area. So registration is a good example. Where registration is really, really easy. People from the site register. It's a really, really easy problem. You can do whatever you want. You'll be fine, except for the day that you're on TV. And so then you can kind of marry it to here's what we can support, and then are there events that then control our timeline. So if we want to do a national promotion in 3 months, that can alter the priority of, okay, let's rewrite the registration system. And then for us, it literally took almost 2 years, and we went transaction by transaction, and we're still not done. And we rewrote that transaction in as a dedicated service in a completely scalable way. And if we made a ton of mistakes, right? Like I remember registration, we had this great idea. It's like, instead of hitting the database, we'll just throw a message into SQS and then process it asynchronously. And then did something magical so that if you got far enough along in the e-commerce funnel and we needed your record, we could pull the message back out and process it on demand. We found out that SQS not actually as persistent or durable as we wanted for something important like a registration. And we didn't know that when we architecturally felt like a good design. In practice, ended up being not that great, and then we had to rewrite it again. But ultimately, it was kind of seeing that funnel and then picking up piece by piece by piece by piece everywhere that we felt transactional traffic and re-architecting for that. And meanwhile, so we're down here doing this, and meanwhile, the company went from probably 40 people to 400 over the course of this year and a half. And we're launching new businesses. We're launching a new business in Japan. In the U.S. site, we were feeling pain in the U.S. site, and we went to Japan and launched Tokyo. We launched JetSetter. One of the things we did with JetSetter, it's actually a completely different architecture at Gilt. It's a separate company. There's a couple things that we share, which is credit card payment processing and the user database. And everything else is built at JetSetter in a completely different stack. And we did that because at the stage that we were at, there was no other way to do it. So let's start a startup and build a great team that can go deliver the best experience for booking travel online. And it was a good strategy because it was the only way we actually could have done it. And then over time, I think the things that we've learned is just, now we try to do kind of one thing at a time. You mentioned small releases. I mean, we were releasing things all the time, and we try to do it one by one. And that way, and a lot of times with the way we actually make a change is you change something in registration, so we go from SQS to something else. So take a percent of traffic, put it on the new system, let it run for a day, look at the numbers, do they match? Did 1% or more of the registrations come through the new system? Okay, go with confidence, and then you just go up. And we're not in a hurry. It usually takes a couple weeks for any to go from 0 to 100%. Maybe longer if you see something we don't like, maybe faster if things are perfect. And then just one by one by one. And then we watch it. So when is something done? It's kind of an interesting concept. And we found that developers think things are done about 4 months before they're done. And so for us, done means it's done, it works, it's tested, it's got the right functional tests in place, it's got the right test plans in place, it's in production, it's doing what it's expected, it's behaving the way you expect it at runtime, it scales gracefully, and it's been behaving that way for enough time that you feel like you can ignore it, and you can ignore it because it's being monitored. So you get an alert if anything changes. And so and then it's done, and then we can go work on another infrastructure component. And it's, I think at the end of the day, it's one of the nice things that comes out of it is, before all this is a lot of pain, right? Because you have great days, and then you have, geez, I wish we had known that was coming because we could have made the experience way better for people. And then you get to the end of it, and you feel really, really good about the software that you built, and kind of have the knowledge that maybe it'll last for 6 months or a year, and then you'll hire somebody smarter and then rewrite it, and so goes life.
What's the ratio of developers to DevOps?
So we do things pretty differently. We don't have a traditional operations team. Developers are responsible for everything. So developers deploy their own code. Developers are responsible for putting in place the hooks. There is one person that can help them systematize it and put it in Xenos, but it's the developer's responsibility.
So developers do all the monitoring and features.
expectation is that the developer owns it. And they can get help from, we have a small operations team, and they'll set up and manage, we use Xenos, and they'll work with the developers and say, okay, you got a new service, how do you want, we'll help you hook it up to Xenos so you get the alert if something changes. But the alert, the developer's on the alert. There is no, and there's pluses and minuses, and different developers love it, and different developers don't want to be woken up at night. But at the end of the day, like, you don't want to be woken up at night. I think you said it, like, just make your stuff work, and then you won't be woken up at night. But it's, I don't know that it's the best model, but it does drive, what we wanted was the accountability and the ownership to be back to the person who could fix it.
Do you have the onboarding process for developers? Because, I mean, I would presume most developers would not be familiar with operations.
The honest answer is a challenge. I mean, how do you onboard an engineer? How do you write documentation? So there's a couple things that are really good. One is the short answer is we hire great engineers and they figure it out, I mean, honestly. So one of the ones we just hired, his name's Andre, great guy. He was so flustered. He's like, big stuff. There's all these architectural pieces, all these services. So he wrote a big file. And he put it in a repository, and it's very clear. So even if you don't know make, you can go in and like, oh, I need a new jar or whatever, you can figure out where to put it. And he maintains it. So a new developer comes in, it's git clone, dev bootstrap, make. Or make all make. And then it goes through and it kind of sets up everything. But is extremely readable. And that's the type of person that we love having in Gilt. And then he's the one now who's on point of view with problems with configuration. He was working with me because I installed everything from source slip and run into a problem. And he said, wipe your machine, start over. And that's what we did. And we went through it. And now we have a way to get people to a running environment.
All right, Eric?
I recently got an overview of the operation and architecture that runs at Etsy, and it actually matches what you guys do very closely. The one thing that they
Chad's
do.
a smart guy.
Oh, you know that, okay. The one thing that they do that's interesting that is they have so much mass of users that when they roll out a feature, they start by rolling it out to 5% of the users, or some very small percent of the users, and then see what happens. And it's actually that aspect of trial and error is there, but it's a limited damage control. They're very big on continuous integration, and each developer does deploy straight out to production and then do their own monitoring, which sounds pretty similar to what you're doing. The way that they ramp up new engineers is actually a little scary. They require the engineer to make their first commit to production on day one, or they can't leave. I kid you not, that's real. Every developer on their team has to commit on the first day and send it out to production. And the reason that they do this is actually they want the developers to have a certain fear of what they're doing, and that way they really take as much precaution as possible. And I thought that was kind of fascinating, sort of throw each engineer into the water and hope they don't fail. Now mind you, when they do roll things out, they are doing it to only 5%. And it's stepped, it's not just 5% on everyone. It actually starts only internal, their QA team checks it, then 5%, then progressively more, and then there's a certain point where it goes out to everybody.
Well, Justin, with Blip and just the growing number of customers, and your customers have all different requirements and needs, the whole support structure is evolved. I mean, with the growth, how did your teams and how did Blip take care of that?
So we have a content team that's just, they interface with producers and that's all they do. So they not only are responsible for doing all the support mail, but they also know just about every show on Blip that's worth knowing. And they keep track, they work closely with the ad sets team actually to put together packages of shows to go out and sell. So they're a big part of that, and they'll interface with the content producers and deal with whatever problems they have, and then interface with us when they have problems. So the way when we deploy then is, especially if it's going to be something that is a little bit scary, is we have sort of tiered beta groups. So we have people who know and always want the latest, greatest stuff, and we can roll stuff out to them in the very beginning, and then little by little out to everyone else.
Okay, now, Mike, you were talking, this is for Eric, because you mentioned the word database a couple of times, and this is a good part of your background. With growth, I mean, it's always the issues people have with databases, and that they're not fast enough, they're not keeping up with all the transactions. So the question I have for you is, the process of choosing databases, choosing which one, now there's so many different flavors, there's so many different aspects of it all. I want to hear what's your mindset on how to approach this?
It's very specific to the project and what you're trying to achieve. There's cases made for each database where it's a best fit for. Relational databases is far more flexible if you want to transition from one to another, and if you make the wrong mistake, nothing terrible really will happen. All modern day relational databases can scale, it's just there's more pain in doing it. If you start going for NoSQL solutions like MongoDB, CouchDB, Cassandra, it's pretty hard to transition from one to the other, so you're kind of married to it. There's also a certain point in your traffic and production level that it becomes impossible to move. Not that it's actually impossible, but that it's realistically impossible. There's just so much traffic hitting your database that it's not worth the effort. It's easier to try to figure out how to scale it. Each project has a very specific match for a database. I mean, it's not like there's no general answer that everyone can just use Oracle and it'll work. Every scenario is different. Relational databases are generally a potential fit for every project, but not necessarily the best fit. Where a NoSQL or non-relational database will match specific projects and what you're trying to achieve and get back from them, and may not work at all for something else you're trying to achieve. Generally, just by the name of it, it's heavily relational data where you're cross-accessing many pieces against each other is better in a relational database. But most web-based applications, they don't actually have that relational bit of data. Generally, people normalize their data because it's habitual, and that's the way who's been doing this for 4 or 5 years or more has been brought up to think to put your users here and your orders here. But actually, if you denormalize it, you end up with a simpler architecture that's easier to maintain and technically could perform better if it was built properly. But it depends again on your application. But most modern day web apps, not all, but most, could fit within that mold of a non-relational database. So case by case.
Yeah, I would, in the list of NoSQL, I would add Project Voldemort, which I know is a terrible name, but is an incredible piece of software that came out of LinkedIn. It's an open source implementation of Amazon's Dynamo that LinkedIn uses, and that's what we use at Gilt. We wrapped it in a nice RESTful interface, and it has get and put. I think are the only 2 commands. Has the lead moves and get and put. But Project Voldemort is rock solid, and one of the nice things they did is they worked on the sharding and communication layer for Dynamo, and did not try to reinvent the database engine. So you can run your own persistence engine on your nodes. At Gilt, we run Berkeley DB, which is also what LinkedIn runs, which is 25 years old, supported by Oracle. But if you're going to store an order somewhere, that's kind of a nice place to stick it. But Project Voldemort's really good. And then I'd agree with everything you said around the database technology. And one of the things that and then I'll add, at Gilt, we have a philosophy that nothing touches relational on the front end. We just gave up. Relational technology does not work for web traffic at all. So that's point 1. And then point 2 is it's usually an architecture problem, not a database problem. And so when we look at it, particularly, so in Gilt's case, this is one of our challenges today, is you start off with a monolithic app and you focus on getting to market, you get to market, and then you're lucky and it grows and it's successful, blah, blah, blah. And then you have lots of data, and then you have lots of tables, and then you have lots of functionality that's in one database. And that fundamentally is a big problem, right? So if we had been really, really smart, we'd have had in the beginning a database for the user data, and we would have had 5 of them, or 4, rule of 4. We'd have 4 databases to begin with, and then we just wouldn't worry about it, right? Because from the beginning, you had the ability to scale horizontally built into a service throughout the users would go. And we do the same thing for inventory and order management and all these other things. And we had lots of small applications that each had their own persistence technology. And had we done that, we honestly would have saved it's probably going to be over $10 million of re-architecture of the Lightning Guild over the next few years because of that mistake. And I call it a mistake. Had we done that, maybe we wouldn't have gone to market fast enough, and maybe Guild would be a different company today. So it probably was the right decision. But right now we're re-architecting everything, essentially, to build isolated services that have their own persistence. And a lot of them will use relational. We're big fans of Postgres internally, so a lot of the services run Postgres, a lot run different stuff.
Where is Blip on the database and map?
We're primarily a MySQL shop. We do some NoSQL. We use it for document storage. We drive a ton of stuff through RSS feeds. You know, all our players are driven through RSS feeds. So we've played with different document storage or NoSQL databases for our document storage cluster, but we always have a backup in MySQL. So in case one of those things falls over, and we were using Cassandra for a while. Sometimes that would fall over, and we could always fall back on the MySQL database if we needed to.
All right, I want to, a couple of quick things. There's an end section I want to get to, but a couple of things here that I've noticed a lot of startups is that early on, the person who takes on responsibility as the CTO is the first tech developer on, of the crew, who may be a great developer, but because he knows more about technology or she knows more about technology than the other one or two, they take on that mantle of leadership. And I've seen that a lot, and in some cases I've even had to counsel some startups where they had to, get somebody else, which is sort of difficult, to come in and take ownership of technology and let that one person be the lead developer. It's an issue. And I was talking with someone earlier tonight about whether companies today think about legacy issues. Like in my day, legacy issues, mainframe, mid-range systems. We're not talking about it now, but I want people to start thinking about, if somebody comes in who takes over from somebody else, there is legacy, even if it's short-term legacy. And this is something, how is, it may not take place in your shops, but how do you see that being dealt with? Now thinking as a person who wasn't groomed to be the CTO, or so that it thrust upon them and then has it snatched away. So, now talking as a CTO as a person, not as just as a tech fixture.
So one of my favorite companies is Gore Industries, and I like them for two reasons. One is they don't have titles, so this is totally not a problem. And then two is they do this really cool thing where they painted 150 parking spots in every office. And when people started parking on the grass, they opened a new office. Right? And they did that because people can manage about 150 connections, give or take, to the point that they know about weddings and birthdays and that sort of thing. And they grew this great company that built Gore-Tex and a bunch of other stuff. So the no title thing definitely helps. And I think flattening the organization helps a lot. And then at the end of the day, it's just about people working together to deliver great things that, if you're building a website for consumers, the consumer's happy. If you're unfortunate enough to work in a B2B business, try to make the other B happy. I used to do that, it sucks. But I think that helps a lot. And then some of it's, I think our society tends to recognize people based on people, how big is your organization, how big is your budget, and I think that's unfortunate, but it's there. I don't know, and I think it's a really interesting question because, take me for example, I love developing software. That's more important to me, delivering great things for Gilt and building, I get excited about the little features we offer that make our members happier, drive revenue. I love that stuff. And that's way more important to me than any of the other organization size doesn't matter, budget doesn't matter. It's, are we hiring and working great people who have great features? I think that's really important. And so, but not everybody thinks like that. And so how do we create an environment where people can be really happy about the thing that they're really great and passionate about and not worry about the other social aspects of recognition.
The reason why I brought this up is, and I talked about passion early on in the program, is that CTOs are a different animal than CEOs, CMOs, because you truly are passionate about technology. And the thing is, sometimes you go days without, you just want to get things to work, and you really are driven. Now, CEOs and CMOs are driven in a different way. And I bring this up only because they don't have to stay through the nights working nonstop with teams to get things done. CTOs and technology teams do. And it's a mindset that I've seen that other C-level, managers don't fully get or understand or cannot appreciate. And, it's something which it comes up, and I try to explain to CEOs, like, I understand what your CTO is going through. I want to understand also, in your shop, like Jason, does Mike, who is the CEO of Mike Hudak, who I should know quite well, of Blip, does he understand what it is you all go through? And
Sure, I think we're really lucky in that, 4 out of the 5 founders of Blip are all techie, geeky guys. So, Mike knows what it is to stay up all night to get some code done. And he also has been, we've all been really good about keeping each other from getting to burnout and getting to, pushing yourself too hard. So, yeah, I think, because we've had such a good relationship, that's been pretty easy for us.
So I'm curious then, at Gilt, is your CEO tech-minded? Does he or she?
So our CEO today is Kevin Ryan. He was the original, the idea came from him and our original investor in Gilt. And before that, he started DoubleClick with Dwight Merriman. Dwight Merriman's also an original investor in Gilt. And it is a huge, huge advantage for us to have, they built DoubleClick together and they kind of get that piece of it. I think it makes a huge difference. And we were talking, I think, earlier today, and the word that came to mind was just there's this trust between, for me, between me and Kevin, there's just an implicit trust there that we're doing everything possible to ultimately create the greatest value for the shareholders, which is and creating the best experience for the members, right? And there's just this high level of trust that we're doing that and every decision is aligned in that direction, which I think helps. And it also helps that Kevin works really, really hard. There's days where he's up all night preparing for something, and it's a different, maybe a different type of work, but I think the level of effort is there.
All right, I want to get to the question now about when CTOs have to do things outside their comfort zone. So, facing Excel spreadsheets, having to work on budgets, having to work on management, having to deal with personnel issues. You think about all the things that, as a technologist, probably don't float your boat. But now with these extra responsibilities, how do you cope with having to have these responsibilities, even if delegated to somebody else, but that you have to be totally aware of, because when you have your company meetings, you need to have your input, and people are going to ask you, like, how is this tied to our bottom line? How is this tied to meeting our numbers? So how does that make you feel when you have to put that hat on?
I happen to enjoy that stuff. I like to make an ROI case for pretty much everything that gets implemented. I believe that if you don't do that, you get too caught up in technology and start doing things that are fascinating and amazing, but may not actually yield what it costs to build them. So I don't particularly mind doing cross-channel work, I guess you could call it. I'm not particularly fond of HR stuff, which is a major aspect of the role, because you're always hiring for different roles to fill. But I don't think that it's bad that a CTO gets an understanding of what's going to help the business bottom line, what's going to impact the budget, technology side, other aspects of business elements. I think that's important. I don't know if it's critical, but I do think it's important.
Yeah, I would say at the end of the day, it always comes back to people. And at Gilt, it was just like, that was not my strength early on, and had a great team that could do it. And they would help, right? So they can help take that, what is the plan for the budget for the next year, which when you're 6 months old is pretty hard. But you can get help. And I think knowing when, just being honest about the things that you're passionate and interested in and not, I think is really, really important. And things can get big enough that you get people who are, you know, they love financial planning in Excel, and they, you know, you just really love it, and it's like, that's great. And you want that person at Gilt, and they're doing a great job, and it's, you know, one less thing, you know, it's one less hour we just spend away from code or working with teams.
I joined a hackerspace. So I suck it up, do the work, and I get my make on after work or nights and whenever I can. And, you know, I still get into the code at Flip every once in a while, but only for, you know, non-time critical stuff. And I get my geek on through NYC Ecosystem.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why I brought this section up is that it's becoming, you know, more and more a numbers game. And, you know, everyone has to start, you know, owning up and, you know, we want to do new things, we want to get new things accomplished, and to start making cases for what it is you want to get done within, you know, startups and even working in growth companies. So I put it out to you, while you don't have to totally own the spreadsheets, the CTOs, I would suggest that become familiar with what's really driving the business. And when it starts to grow, when you start looking at different divisions within the business, understand what their needs are, and just, you know, if you start building things out, if the company can afford, because you're going to start seeing how much it costs to build out whatever you want to build out. Just things to think about, because a lot of these questions are coming up when we work with startups and we have them do presentations, and, you know, the CTO will start talking about an aspect of the company, but somebody comes up, well, you know, what does it really cost you? What's really involved? I mean, there's this sort of just dead air.
I like the idea of, we actually do this for other projects as well, but like clear ROI on all the initiatives is a good habit. And then they know for sure A/B testing, and then pretty soon you only do A/B testing. And there's something you said that was brilliant, and I forgot it, so I'll come back to you.
Okay. Oh, I said something about it?
Yeah.
Oh my God, wow. Okay, so just have that recorded. Oh, yeah, it's being recorded, so great. All right, the last section of the evening, I wanted to save time for this, the cloud. And I want people to get involved with this, because with all the startups I speak to, and emerging companies, even growth companies, and companies who've gotten rounds of funding, I ask them technology questions, and their answer to me is, well, we have the cloud. I'm like, excuse me? And that's it. You know, quick thing. I look at the cloud the way I looked at bandwidth providers in the mid-90s. Right? Back then, I bought my T1, you know, and it just said the bandwidth. Now, your cloud service provider, you know, is your bandwidth provider, because you get the cloud services, and internet comes tethered along with it. You're getting, in essence, managed services. But now the big question is, you know, is the cloud right for everyone? I mean, it's cost effective. Should all startups be starting out in the cloud? And I want you guys to start jumping into this, because there are breakpoints in the cloud. There are points where when it's no longer feasible. There are points where there are security issues involved. You know, whether or not you have your cloud multi-home, do you have, you know, parallel instances running? So
Anyone start a company today not in the cloud? Why?
It may be a very difficult business case to, if you're doing B2B sales, around compliance, customers who need SAS 70 certificates, you know, whether or not, you know, Amazon is HIPAA compliant, we have enough developers. So I think there actually is a case for not starting in the cloud. I may or may not choose to do it, but I think there actually is a strong case to not do it. A case not to do it.
You're gonna hit the compliance too.
No, we don't have that kind of issue. We just don't have that. Our capacity requirements are not that high, and I inherited a couple of servers, and it's not a priority to me.
Yeah.
So
But if
when
you're starting over.
when we get to the point where we do require high availability, 24/7, or something close to it, then yes. I won't put high availability servers in the least rack space. I'll move to EC2 probably, or something like that, like a right scale.
So I will say this about the cloud, is it gets expensive in a hurry. You know, we started Glip back in 2005, so there really wasn't a lot of this stuff around then. But once it did show up, we were very interested in, oh, look at this great service. We can, you know, have a backup of all of our videos as a, you know, last resort thing. And this was still pretty early on, and we did the math on just how much it would cost just to transfer all the videos one time to and from EC2 and or S3, excuse me. And it was, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars just to put all the videos there once. And I think that one of the things that I think that the dirty little secret with a lot of these guys is they get you locked into this great API, and you're all set with it and everything's just working, and you don't notice that your bills just creep ever higher, and then you reach some threshold where it becomes much more economical to do this yourself and have your own gear than it does to rely on them. Now, I don't know if that's just because I'm just pushing a lot of bits and I've got, you know, hundreds of servers and they're all storage and delivery, but I would imagine the same is true for lots of people.
Since I mentioned the ROI, there is definitely a breakover point where if you hit enough, if you utilize enough cloud servers, it would be cheaper to buy the hardware. The aspect of buying the hardware though comes with a bunch of negative sides, and the fact that you obviously can't add a new machine by pushing a button. You now have to actually purchase one and install it. So if you're trying to grow real quickly, like in minutes as opposed to in a day, that becomes an aspect that almost makes the cloud worth paying for in some scenarios. It depends how many servers and how fast you're growing. The actual cloud services that you're using will really change the answer to that question though, because it seems that everyone's talking about cloud servers as cloud as a whole, but there's also cloud services like databases in the cloud and actual services like payment services and such, and each one has their own specific answer to that question, I would say. I think anyone starting a new company and not using a cloud server is probably making a mistake unless you have HIPAA issues. It's probably the only rational reason I can see not to start with it, you know, start with cloud servers, just because you can always move to hardware. It's easy. It's one of the easier things to move if you build things properly so it's distributed. You start transitioning server by server. You don't have to incur downtime. Then it's not that big a deal to move to the hardware. Other services like a payment service in the cloud or various data in the cloud, that's real hard to move. So you want to make sure those decisions are made wisely. Amazon RDS is basically MySQL. For the life of me, I'm not really sure why you would choose that over a local MySQL instance, unless you're an EC2 customer, and then it makes sense. But your local, you can run your own MySQL instance and pretty much have a lot more flexibility. So that's one service, but then there's other services that are like Amazon S3. You're never going to be able to have that much storage with that much backup redundancy for anywhere near the cost of Amazon S3 unless you're dealing with giant bits like Justin.
So I remember the brilliant comment you made. You guys mind if we take that quick aside, pop it off the stack. You made the comment that it's kind of our responsibility to be really familiar and know the key levers in the business. And I think that's really, really important. And just to reinforce that, because at the end of the day, you look at these financial models, these complicated spreadsheets with formulas all over the place, and we understand what the hell's going on. And they don't really matter because each business will ultimately be boiled down to like 1, 2, or 3 really meaningful numbers or levers in the business. And those are the 3 that like I think this group can figure out and understand intuitively how they work. And then we have an opportunity to take that and really use that to drive how we think about the entire business. Right, so cut through all the rest of this stuff. We did a KPI project, Gilt had 50 KPIs. 2 matter, right? Which 2? And that's kind of our job. And so how do we find those 2 that really, really are tied to the business and then make that part of every decision going forward in the business?
Right, one of the things I want to open up to everyone here is, I don't know, how many of you are using cloud services, platforms? Okay. So, I want you to think of the conversion points. Like, when you start thinking about like, when are we going to have to, if we have to move off the cloud? Are we going to move totally off the cloud? Are we going to be hybrid? You know, what do people out here think their decision points are going to be? Looking off in the future, that are like screaming at you saying, you know, we've got to make a move. And you can take guesses about your own company, but it's just interesting to see what people's people are thinking about.
I feel like that's the kind of thing like now cloud services are so available and give you so much flexibility in terms of growth. It seems as if that's, I want to say that's not a problem until it's a problem. I know that we gotta anticipate, like large issues of growth. Like I know with, if you're using something like Slicehost, you gotta, and you want to expand your server capacity, you might have to, have a couple hours to spare before that change takes over, so you gotta anticipate that. I don't know that we're gonna grow so fast that we can't do that if we need to. I want to say that, like, to get us from the point we're at now to a point where, like, things like traffic are even a worry, the cloud is more than enough. And it's not until we hit substantial growth that we're
How many people here are running hybrids? And so you sound like you're pure cloud.
We do our own personal cloud, so we just have built our own internally and use Virtual Man and Eucalyptus to manage everything internally. And so the thinking is that once we're ready to expand out, then we can go ahead and Amazon once we're at that scale point. And just tie that all into Eucalyptus.
Yeah, we need to use dedicated colo facilities because we send email, and you basically don't get good email delivery from the cloud. So that's why we've had to approach the hybrid. But it has actually been useful to have a backup like physical facility available. If one time we had a customer who was just having some kind of network problem connecting to our cloud servers. It was something completely out of our control. There was nothing we could do to alleviate the problem, but we could say, hey, hit our colo instead. So it's nice sometimes, if you have other reasons for it, it's nice to have that physical, backup kind of in place.
How do you scale your email if you have to host the servers?
Well, it's funny because they just launched SES, and so there may be a very different answer to this question in 6 months. But you need physical facilities to send email. Basically, the low-cost shared IP spaces they attract low-quality senders, and they all wind up polluted after time. So we have to basically bake into our infrastructure planning, getting physical servers. But fortunately, it only has to be for actually sending email. Everything else can totally be scaled to the cloud. So we just have to anticipate that demand, and everything else will take care of itself.
And how many people are doing elastic computing? How many people are doing elastic computing? The idea that you can actually scale up and then scale back down. So let's say, in Gilt's model, everyone thinks we do it, but we don't because it's hard. So you can imagine like running Gilt from 11:30 to 1:30 with 15 servers.
Yeah, we've wanted to experiment with that, but we haven't.
We set it up on right scale. It's pretty straightforward to set up, and it ran itself. It wasn't on a site doing the kind of volume of Gilt, but you
You go up and down.
watch it adding servers and
Coming back down.
I think the problem is that it kind of works for doing basic stuff. Since you're doing something that is not basic, you have to do a lot of custom work around it. And, we sort of do it manually when we need to. Automating this proves to be very, very difficult.
I've done this for.
So we'll probably get to it at some point.
Yeah.
I've done this for worker processes where you're doing things offline that need to get generated and with large quantities of data computing power. And I gotta say, it's a job and a half to set this stuff up, but when it's all said and done, I had a system that would deploy some 30 or so servers and just shut them all down when it was done. And it was great in theory, but it was quite a lot of effort to get it going and monitoring all those servers when something goes wrong. There's just so many aspects to it and so many gotchas to it. It's tough. It's in theory great and in implementation difficult.
Did you use a service or did you do it all yourself?
Coded using the Rackspace API.
I'm curious, people who are either in the cloud or not, at what point in company growth do you move to geographic redundancy?
interesting question. So I'll give you Gilt's perspective. We start off in the cloud, we glue in the cloud until we hit probably a little over, probably 100K a month in spend. And that was kind of arbitrary. You could co-load stuff and then hire people. So that was pretty easy. But we didn't move because of the money, we moved because of the predictability, and I think Ian, you alluded to this, but it's just, when something goes wrong, when you have a slight, we would notice a latency in the network. Like, what was that blip? And we wanted to know. And it was that, that OCD around controlling every aspect of the entire network to figure out every single problem and make it great that drove us into our own facility. And we're actually pretty happy with that decision. And then the idea is then you do a hybrid cloud so that the stuff that can go elastic, and we think really elasticity is kind of the big selling point of the cloud. What was your question?
Geographic redundancy.
So,
Do you have a second?
we're having this debate internally. I referenced Project Voldemort. They natively, for the Dynamo systems, they now support geographic dispersal, so you can run half your cluster in a different data center. You're going to be close, but that's really, really nice. We picked the data center in Virginia, so we're close to EC2's main sites. We've decided at this point it's not worth it. And we're willing, internally we'll take a day of downtime a year, and then incur the cost of it. And I think at some point in the next year or two, maybe that changes.
Which is not worth it?
Having a full DR site, fully redundant DR site in a second colo. Because the reality is colos rarely go down. If you pick a quality colo, what's the probability that your colo is going to go down for a full day this year? What's the cost of that happening? Compare that to the cost to your business and your reputation if it does happen. And I think at Gilt, we're not quite there yet where we've decided it's worth the investment.
Are you looking at geo for performance or for redundancy?
Redundancy.
All right, we're gonna
In earthquake country, you want it somewhere else too.
we're gonna stop here because I've been told that if I don't get things on time, my head's a whirl. That's from my business partner, and I have to pay heed to that. We are going to break. We're lucky because we're the food group. I worked it out for us on the CTO side. And then at 8 o'clock, Justin is going to speak to you all in more depth and detail about blip and technology issues and decisions. And we're also going to have Q&A time after that, and we can continue through the break. You guys can continue discussing issues that were brought up. And I just want to thank you all for participating. This is the first kind of thing we did like this. And we broke it up between CEOs and CTOs because you guys have different issues and topics that you want to discuss and want to learn about that would be wasted on them. And like a lot of the things you guys are talking about today, like there didn't give you this explanation of what does that term mean or anything else. And that's what we're trying to foster, is more things like this so we can bring more, in essence, well, it's not a round table, but bring more technology people together with experienced people like Eric, Mike, and Justin to talk through and learn from their experiences and from their real world issues and concerns. So thank you so much. Thank you, panel. And